Good evening, everybody. Join us here again on the Friday of the week leading up to Good Shepherd Sunday, Vocation Sunday in St Eugene's Cathedral Hall in beautiful Derry. Any of you who've been following us earlier on this week will have known I've had 4 great conversations with different people. A young couple, a man dedicated to youth ministry in the faith context for 40 years, a priest ordained 13 years ago, a young woman of 18 planning to study theology when she goes on to university next year. And for tonight, the last of these conversations focusing on the idea of calling, of vocation, I'm now in the hot chair and I'm going to be quizzed and grilled by Dr. Nicola Duffy, who did a wonderful job during the COVID conversations at the beginning of Holy Week. So, Nicola Duffy, I hand over to you. I am in your gentle hands for the next 25 minutes or so. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Bishop Donal. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about vocation, and it got me thinking in my own head during the week about what a vocation is, and it got me thinking that I think probably in my youth when I was younger we very much saw a vocation as a religious calling. And I think that the definition of vocation has probably expanded. To me, a vocation is a real suitability to a job or a real calling. So I feel very lucky. I feel I have a vocation. Obviously, it's not in the religious domain, but I feel very privileged to have a vocation, and I think it's a real gift. And I suppose my first question to you would be, do you feel that your vocation was a gift to be given to you?
Well, I suppose where we started at the beginning of the week ties in with that, in that I suggested that a vocation was each person discovering their path to holiness, whatever form that might take, or forms that might take. Because for you it'll take the form of being married and having a family and being a doctor and being involved in voluntary organisations. So it's each person discovering their call to holiness. And I think you're right when you discover what's right for you, that God's at work in that somehow or other. And it's a gift to be able to discern and to be at peace with the vocation that you have. I was lucky enough. I had about 9 years between leaving school and going for ordination, and I hope that by 27 years of age, and having lived those 9 years, a number of them abroad, at least I hope you come to some sense that that's the right decision for me at the time. And yes, finding that peace is a great gift, because many people struggle to find peace with who they are and where they are, or where they've been, or where they're going, and you'd come across many people suffering in different ways, just as clergy do as well. Yes, discovering your own path to holiness is a gift.
At what age did you feel the vocation begin to call you?
It's one of those things that happens all, in my own case, very, very quietly. I had an uncle who was a priest, and I went to Garantara, St. Dissey's College, and there were wonderful priests who were teachers there. But it really only was in upper sixth that the priest who happened to be the careers teacher said, "What are you going to do next year?" I said, "I thought of teaching because my mother's a teacher." And he said, "You ever think of being a priest?" I said, "Well, I've thought about it. Will you give it a try?" So it really was very much yes, I'll take the next step into seminary and see what happens there. And I had 2 years in Queen's, I had a year in Germany, 2 years back in Queen's, and then 4 years in Rome. But I suppose my crisis time, my decision time came about 15 months before priestly ordination would have been due. I was due to decide that I want to apply to go forward to be a deacon, which is really for your last 12 months. And I went through a real crisis time in my life. But at the time I had to decide, I got the nudge. And that was the gift. That was the decision time that, yeah, this is the right thing. Now, I can look back and say I realise why it was a crisis time for me. I was just exhausted because it had been after a particularly stressful year, the Holy Year in Rome, blah, 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 house responsibilities and all that. But I can look back at a time when I felt, I have to make a decision, and the clouds opened enough to give me the nudge in the right direction to go forward. And then I can look back and say, well, yes, I had lived abroad, I had lived on my own in a secular context. I knew my own mind reasonably well, was very happy to go forward, and I've just taken it from there. So it was one of those things that just developed, and somebody thought maybe I'd ask this guy, and he said, well, I'll give it a try and see what it's like. So it developed very gradually, rather than immediately.
Do you think that secular that secular time informed your vocation?
Well, having been at a Catholic boarding school, 250 guys there, busy life and lots of stuff happening, and a whole community, and as I say, wonderful priests who were in charge of us and the teachers. Then down in Connor, Belfast, there was the seminary in Belfast known as the wing of St Malachy's College, the clerical students' wing. But you had the chance then to go and study at a degree at Queen's University, and I did German, Italian, which got me 2 summers working in Italy and a year in Germany, and then theology in Rome and so on. So yes, you had a chance to be out there and to see where the temptations in other directions pulling you in a way that resonated with deep down who I was, or was I happy with the direction of travel that was in me? And I felt affirmed even in the year in Germany and working in the factory in Italy and all of those things. I felt affirmed that, yeah, this is resonating with who I am as Donal McKeown. Yes, there were temptations and other considerations came across my mind, but I felt at peace with the steps I was taking. And then we had that little crisis. But I think, yes, you need to be in a situation which isn't supportive all the time.
Yes.
And actually be challenged to say, do you want to be here, or do you just know nothing else?
I think you've obviously had a very positive experience of the church growing up, and that obviously informed your vocation. I had a very similar experience. I had a GP, Raymond McLean, R.I.P., who I just remember him from being a child. I just remember having a sore throat, a Charlie Nash poster, and all these old memories. And I feel that he really informed some of my decisions around doing medicine. I suppose the question I'd ask is, do you feel that there are people out there that you've met as you've got older who maybe didn't have as many positive experiences or were felt as supported as you, who missed their vocation?
Well, there certainly are people who've had poor experiences, bad experiences, damaging experiences of church and of church personnel, and those are as genuine experiences as mine were, and I have to take...
I don't think I meant that. Maybe I misread it. I just mean even people that were neutral and didn't get a wee push and didn't have those positive role models that you're describing.
Yes, that certainly is the case, and yet deep down, maybe because of those real circumstances of their life, their vocation actually was to something else.
Yes. Yes.
So it's very hard to know. You meet somebody, you fall in love, you get married or whatever. Some things seem to happen by chance.
Yes.
And I suppose for every person you want to look back and join up the dots and say, yeah, that was a difficult time, looked like a mistake, but actually it was an important corner for me or an important event. So yes, people may look back and say, if I had got better encouragement, I might have.
Yes.
We can live the mites of our lives. I think discovering and being at peace with who you are means accepting the mess, the rubble of the past, and turning it into a foundation for the future, turning the rubbish into compost rather than something that stinks in the corner. So it's accepting the reality of our lives. And then I suppose one of the good things of having been abroad and so on as a student, I think you have to develop the ability to relate to people. And it's been relationships that sustain all of us. When you know there are people who trust you, who love you. I mean, I've got brothers and sisters and nephews and nieces and hundreds of cousins and cousins' children and so on. So I grew up in that environment where relationships and belonging and being with people was important. And that's been terribly important in sustaining me as a human being, because there's that old phrase, grace builds on nature. You have to focus on who you are as a human being for the grace of God to work on it. Jesus worked on who Peter was and who James and John were. So how people's lives turn out may seem to be the result of having been standing on the Sea of Galilee at a particular time when somebody passed, and somebody else wasn't standing there when Jesus passed. And yet it's a matter of accepting my life is made up of apparent coincidences and being at peace with the story that is being woven there, and believing that God is in that, rather than thinking, if only something else had happened, I could have married somebody else. Where we are is where we are, and it's a matter of finding peace with that. And if you can find peace with the past, then you can look forward to the future. If you look back on the past only with regret or horror, it's very hard to face the future with hope and confidence. So that's where mercy and forgiveness and belonging and love and healing are so much more important than just having an iPhone 10.
In terms of vocation, your vocation is different from mine because you've obviously, I believe, have had to give up different things to me. I'm married and I have young children who've informed my vocation. Do you feel that having to give that up as part of your vocation is something that you've ever felt resentful of?
No, I haven't.
And that's the true vocation. That's why you don't. Maybe?
I've got nephews and nieces, and I feel part of a family.
Yes.
I don't feel lonely or cut off. I remember that book by M. Scott Peck I often quoted, The Road Less Travelled, that first sentence, life is difficult. Life is difficult when you're married.
Yes.
When you're a parent. Life is difficult when you're a priest and single. Life is difficult when you're widowed or unattached or whatever. Life is not easy for anybody, but I think rather than complaining about the problems and thinking somebody should remove the problems, and if only I didn't have to do that, life would be fine, you say, great, that's where I am, that's who I am, that's my situation, and you process that pain of being human in a healthy, life-giving way. Mm-hmm. So yes, I've been blessed in terms of relationships,
yes, a
sense of belonging, a sense of joy in what I do, a sense of having enjoyed immensely working with young people in schools, and that's been a great blessing. There probably are others, whether they're married or single or clergy or religious, who perhaps didn't have that blessing of maturer human relationships, and that can stunt growth a bit as well. But it's a matter of finding peace with who you are in the concrete circumstances of your own life and looking forward to the future, because you believe the past was graced and the future will be graced as well.
I took an opportunity to reflect on my own sense of vocation, getting prepared for today. And I think I would need to be honest that I feel sometimes some bad behaviours like overworking and just maybe a little bit of workaholism in my, I sometimes wonder if I use, or if people use vocation as an excuse to not identify that there's an imbalance there, there's a balance issue. So I suppose the question I would ask you is, have you ever felt during your vocation that your work was so all-consuming, whilst important and valuable and really enjoyable, that the balance was off and that you were calling it vocation when it was something else?
I remember somebody saying, you've never really said yes until you've learned how to say no. And I think that was an important lesson another priest told me many years ago. And I also did, maybe 30 years ago, I did the Enneagram.
Oh, I love the Enneagram.
Which was great. Well, I am good because I am successful was my particular number, whatever it was. Is it a 3 or something?
You're a 3.
3, that's right.
Do you know what I am?
No.
I'm a hard 8.
A hard 8? Which is the other side, isn't it, 3?
I'm a very aggressive 8.
I learned that I don't have to always to be successful at things. But when you grow in self-awareness and know what the default position is, yes, and what the reaction to that can be, yes, it's good to be aware of that and know I don't have to be doing things all the time and killing myself and feeling I'm obliged to do it.
I was going to see a patient early last Saturday morning after we'd had the conversation about doing this, and I was leaving the house very early and I was driving over the bridge and I saw you walking and talking to someone that was obviously a more vulnerable citizen. It was very early on a Saturday morning, and it made me wonder if there was a similarity between some of my behaviours around work and yours. And I wondered, if anyone has ever said to you, stop or hold back a bit, or are you making, you're doing too much?
Well, I must.
Very early in the morning, and I thought that's a real vocation. But at the same time, I thought, is this similar to some of the traits that I see in doctors, particularly? Doctors do have vocations, but they're extremely driven, and as a group of people, are mostly work an awful lot, do a lot of hours. It's just the way they're programmed. And I just wondered if you think that maybe you're programmed similarly and call it a vocation.
Well, I think one thing I've done to maybe compensate for being a number 3 in the Enneagram, I've kept exercising a lot.
Yes.
A couple of marathons, 10Ks, Belfast Dublin Maracycle, a lot of five-a-side football, all of that. And walking around the city here is part of my exercise routine, which I think is part of my way of compensating for doing too much. So I would tend not to open the computer on a Saturday unless I absolutely have to.
I did feel like I was kind of spying on you, sort of.
No, and I don't mean.
I just observed that it was.
I'm
I
glad
just
to
thought
be out.
it was interesting. It was
Glad
lovely.
to be out
and
and about.
Yeah, and it's lovely to see those engagements because I think it's very important. And a question that's interesting is I will often be approached by young doctors who want, young medical students who want to be doctors, and it's a very difficult field currently. And I would often have a gut instinct for whether someone had a vocation, or if they were being encouraged perhaps by school for their ability, or perhaps been encouraged by relatives through an expectation. And I'm interested to know if you have ever met anyone who's come to you for advice and you didn't feel that they had the appropriate skills, and how did you manage that?
Well, I think anything you do, you listen to what people are saying and trying to hear not what they're saying but what they're really saying.
Yes.
And help them to realise what they're saying, to identify what's going on inside them. And then all you can do is ask someone to be true to who they are, true to themselves. Because I've known wonderful doctors, for example, who drove themselves, but that was who they were. I've seen them in Lourdes, for example, volunteering to go out to work with patients out there in Lourdes. So I've seen wonderful people who've inspired me, but I said I couldn't have the stamina for that. But I think certainly as a school teacher, part of my job was to enable people to be true to themselves, just as I hope I've been learning to be true to who I am and to be in touch with who I am. And that took me years through doing marriage encounter weekends and the youth encounter, and working with young people has been a real privilege in terms of helping me not to be afraid of teenagers.
Yes.
And
I might need to go to some lessons about that. I have 3 at home.
But it's good for having that experience as a priest of working with young people. It certainly was good for me.
Yeah.
I found it a blessing.
You intimated that crisis of, not crisis, but that reflection 18 months before you became a priest. At any point during your vocation, have you had doubts and really felt this is not right for me?
I'm still waiting for my midlife crisis.
You're well under your 3rd act. I know.
I've never had a real crisis time. I've had times when I was absolutely banjaxed and exhausted and so on, but I've never really said, should I have done this, or I wish I had got married. I have got, I think, a good number of healthy, supporting, life-giving relationships, which are a real blessing to me. But haven't undermined my sense of identity as a priest. So I mean, I don't have a mistress and children hidden away somewhere.
You often, when you chat to you talk about your nephews, and obviously it's a point of contact between us because they're in the medical field, and that's something that comes across, that there is a real broadness to your relationships, and they're not just confined to your role as a religious leader. And that probably creates that sense of vocation because it's not just all in the one thing in the one place.
And I suppose what I see in church, maybe the see in family, I have my particular road in life, but together we're wonderful, and there's a huge mixture of relationships. In other words, yesterday one of my cousin's daughters had their second wee boy, so wee Poddy was born, and about 50 of us on the relatives WhatsApp thing, we're all, oh, that's wonderful, that's brilliant photographs. So it's discovering that sense of complementarity. I don't have to be everything as Donal McKeown. I make my contribution, and others will make other contributions. I was with my sister and her family last Sunday, and she's making her contribution that way. And so it's discovering that complementarity in families where we nourish each other with our different vocations, rather than thinking I have to do everything as Donal McKeown on my own. And I suppose that's my vision really for church into the future, is that we would have increasing sense in parishes of there being a whole range of vocations. In other words, there'd be some of the ordained who would have a sacramental ministry, but we would have consecrated religious in the city as well. We would have perhaps permanent deacons, perhaps those who were consecrated virgins. We could have, now the Pope says we can have people instituted as acolytes or instituted as lectors, not just to read at Mass, but to promote the knowledge of the Scriptures and do Lectio Divina, train readers. The acolytes could be, distributing Holy Communion, but also preparing children for First Communion, for promoting Eucharistic adoration. I'd love to see parishes developing a whole sense of, not I have to be ordained a priest or there's nothing else left for me,
Yes.
but actually discovering a whole range of complementary ministries and vocations, full-time, some of them voluntary, building up a vibrant faith community, the people of God that can bring mercy and love to society out there.
And would that be because you're trying to crush the patriarchy, or is it because the church has to evolve because fewer people are entering into the priesthood, or both?
It's reading the signs of the times,
Yeah.
but it goes back to that poster I got when I sent to Rome as a student in 1973 from my sisters and brother. A human figure, look more closely, made up of different human bodies. The caption said, none of us is as smart as all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think helping people to discover that is part of our job as church. And maybe it's countercultural in an individualistic society where it's really all about me,
Yeah.
rather than about us. So I think what the Lord is saying to us in a different time is, listen carefully to one another. Discover where God is calling us, to preparing us for mission. Because you know yourself, there's so much need for mercy and healing and forgiveness in society. Our job is to be able to be equipped with various ministries,
Yes.
to bring that to Derry or wherever it happens to be that it's needed, rather than creating individual heroes.
Yes,
who
I mean,
push
I think
themselves out.
medicine's going in the same direction. We can't possibly, as a population, ages have a doctor in charge of X number of patients. So we've evolved into multidisciplinary teams to work collectively for the better of everyone. So I would agree if it makes sense for the church to have a similar model.
And doctors need nurses, high quality nurses.
Absolutely,
You know,
absolutely.
they
We
are-
have nurses, pharmacists, mental health workers, all sorts of people all working together and collectively. So I like the idea of moving away from the doctor as, and everything else is irrelevant. So that's a great evolution for us as doctors, and I've seen that change with us. So it sounds as if you're in the same thinking that things can't be the priest and that's it. It needs to be shared out.
And in many ways, I look back to 50 or 100 years ago, where there were jobs, major posts for strong women in the church. They ran hospitals,
Yes.
they ran schools, they ran institutions. We actually have nothing for anybody of any significance other than ordained ministry,
Yes.
which really is not a theology of the body of Christ, where there's a whole range of gifts and callings, vocations, and so on. So I have that dream we have it in our plan, that we build welcoming communities, we grow in faith together, and we send people out for mission to bring the mercy and love of Jesus to the world. And that will be done by a community, not by Lone Rangers.
Well, it's very palpable to me, your vocation. It's a joy to behold. Whether I agree, I don't always agree with everything that anyone says. Excuse me, but I don't ever really feel that I need to. I feel that you're open, and your sense. I just because of the job that I'm in, I'm also very exposed to people who are very vocational, and you can't fake it. No. And I believe that people who've got a potent vocation see it in other people. And even when they're exhausted, they'll get up the next day and they'll want to go back and do it again. There's almost nearly, I don't like to use the word addiction because it's got a negative connotation for me, but there is definitely a calling and a commitment palpable in you. And I suppose my last question would be, do you feel that you being like that has helped our community in encouraging more people into vocational jobs?
Well, I think being true, people respect someone who's true to themselves. Yeah. And I enjoy company, I enjoy being with young people, and I'm perfectly happy to go home on my own at night and do a crossword and watch the news. I don't feel sort of lonely going into the house and closing the door and feeling I'm missing out on something, because I'm not. I'm very, very blessed in many ways, and I hope that anything I would do would enable others to believe, A, they have a path to holiness, and B, that they can discover that by being true to who they are, whatever cost that might be, being honest, recognizing that life is difficult, but being prepared to face those and believing in the grace of God to help you make sense of all the Calvaries as well as the Easter Sundays that are there. So, I've been blessed in 44 years of ordained ministry, and I'm looking forward to it. And as I say, the midlife crisis hasn't come yet.
Well, I want to say thank you very much for inviting me here today as a fellow vocationist. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for taking the time. 7:25 already. Thank you for having been with us this evening, perhaps for all the other evenings earlier on this week, as we seek to talk about vocation, discerning what God's path for each one of us is to holiness. It may be a very difficult and painful path, but it's your path to holiness, and don't be ashamed of it wherever you may be on your journey. Thank you for journeying with us. Keep praying that all of us will find the peace that comes from discovering our own call to holiness, to believe that we are loved by God and that we can grow in love of ourselves and of others through that love of God. Thank you to Dr. Nicola Duffy for being here with us this evening. Thank you for being with us as well. Journey on in faith, in hope and in love. God bless.